2018, Elias Crane, a freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon, was hired by a small travel magazine to document forgotten places in America. His job was to capture what time had left behind: ghost towns, abandoned motels, dried-out lakes, places erased from maps. He planned to spend a week in eastern Nevada, exploring a half-buried mining town called Rathmore, a place that hadn't had a living resident since 1954. It didn't appear on GPS. Only a few grainy photos existed online, most from the 1970s. Locals warned him not to go. They said the roads near Rathmore moved, that compasses spun, that even the sky changed there. Elias laughed it off. He loved that kind of folklore. The desolation, the mystery, the silence. He left Portland on October 3, 2018, driving east with his Nikon D850, a tent, and a trunk full of camera gear. He never came back. The last photos he uploaded to the magazine's shared drive were time-stamped October 6, 7:42 p.m. They showed a dirt road vanishing into a red horizon, a church with its steeple broken in half, a sign that read Rathmore Pop 213, though the paint was too fresh for a ghost town. The final image, file name DSC1043.jpg, showed Elias standing in front of an old general store, smiling, camera tripod visible beside him. But the problem was, no one else was there to take it. It was perfectly framed, focused, centered, shot from a height and distance impossible to achieve without another person. When the magazine couldn't reach him for days, they sent a local ranger to check the site. The ranger found Elias's car parked beside the old church, doors unlocked, keys still in the ignition. The camera was on the front seat. Battery dead. Inside were 118 photos on the memory card. The first 117 matched the upload folder. The 118th, DSC 118 JPG, wasn't on the drive. That final image was dark, nearly black, until forensic enhancement revealed a faint light. Elias's campfire, and someone standing behind him. Not beside, behind. The figure was tall, thin, and half-transparent, its face blurred in a way no motion blur could explain. When the ranger checked the ground near the site, there were two sets of footprints, Elias's, and another pair, barefoot, leading straight into the desert. They stopped 20 feet away, and simply vanished. 2 months later, a hiker passing through the same region found a roll of undeveloped 35mm film inside a rusted mailbox near the old general store. It was wrapped in paper labeled, "For whoever finds this, tell them not to look at the photos." The police developed the film anyway. Most of the frames were blurred landscapes, double exposures, and fragments of sky, but 3 were perfectly clear. The first showed Elias's tent, closed from the outside, though his car keys and gear were still inside when found. The second showed Elias standing beside his camera, but his shadow was missing. The third showed a wide shot of the desert at dawn, and dozens of figures standing in the sand, all facing the lens. None of them had faces. The Nevada State Police opened a missing person case, NV 11-1804, but closed it a year later. Official cause: disappearance under unknown circumstances. The magazine deleted their article draft, but one intern saved the archived images. In 2020, they leaked online under the title The Vanishing Photographer, spawning endless Reddit theories, paranormal podcasts, and ghost hunting videos. Every version of the file DSC 118 JPG eventually corrupted itself after a few days. Metadata would rewrite automatically, replacing the timestamp with a single word: retaken. In October 2022, a late-night radio station in Arizona claimed to receive a transmission from an unlisted number. It was a man's voice, calm, distorted, whispering over static. "If you find my camera, don't look at the last photo." Then silence. When traced, the signal was found to originate from the middle of the Nevada desert, where no towers exist. They say if you stand in Rathmore after sunset, you can hear a shutter clicking in the wind, the sound of a camera being used somewhere close. And if you turn toward it too fast, you'll see a man standing with a camera, pointing it at you. They say it's Elias, still out there, still taking pictures. And if he takes yours, your reflection fades a little every time you look in a mirror. It started as a weekend hike, but it ended somewhere that shouldn't exist. In late summer of 2020, two friends, Natalie Hart and Eric Lawson, set out for a hiking trip near the Appalachian foothills in Western Virginia. They planned a 2-day trek through the dense forests near Brookmere, an area known for fog, wildlife, and patchy cell reception. They had mapped their route carefully, but on the second day, Eric's phone buzzed with a notification. His GPS showed a new route, a shortcut marked Unverified Road, less than 1 mile. They hesitated. The trail they were on was steep and muddy, and the shortcut looked like an easy way out. The map even showed a small structure ahead, labeled simply as Rest Stop, Cabin. It wasn't on the park's official map, but both assumed it might be an old ranger station. They decided to follow it. The shortcut began as a narrow dirt path through tall pines. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. No birds, no wind. Even the sound of their footsteps felt wrong, hollow, like walking over a floor instead of forest soil. Eric joked that it felt like walking on someone's ceiling. Natalie didn't laugh. After about 15 minutes, the trees began to thin, and something appeared through the fog. A small, pale structure, 2 stories tall, sitting in the middle of a clearing. It looked like a farmhouse, though there was no driveway, no fence, and no power lines. The roof was intact, the paint oddly clean. The GPS pinged again. "You have arrived." Eric smiled. "Guess it's still standing." They approached cautiously. The house had no number, no signs of life, just one front door and 4 windows, all perfectly symmetrical. Natalie noticed something strange. The windows reflected light differently, as if the glass wasn't glass at all, but water. When they knocked, the door creaked open on its own. Inside it was cold. Not the coolness of shade, but the deep cold of a basement. The air smelled faintly of rain and metal. The living room was almost empty except for a single wooden chair facing the wall. A painting hung crookedly above it, a landscape showing the same forest they'd just walked through. But in the painting, there was no house. Natalie whispered, "Let's go." Eric, curious, stepped closer to inspect the painting. "It's old," he said. "Feels like oil on canvas." He stopped mid-sentence. From upstairs came the sound of footsteps, slow, heavy. Someone was walking directly above them. Eric motioned for Natalie to stay quiet. They stood frozen for nearly a minute, listening as the steps moved across the floorboards, pausing directly above their heads, then continuing toward the stairs. Eric whispered, "There's someone here." Natalie nodded, her eyes wide. She pulled the door open and bolted outside, but Eric stayed just a second too long. He turned to grab his bag and saw movement in the reflection of the window. Someone was standing behind him in the same room. He ran. They didn't stop until they were half a mile down the trail. Natalie finally looked back, but the house was gone. Only trees. The clearing had vanished. She pointed frantically at her phone. The GPS showed nothing. The path they had taken no longer existed. They camped that night near a stream, too shaken to speak. Eric barely slept. When he finally drifted off, Natalie heard him mumbling, over and over, The house had no shadows. None. By morning, Eric was gone. His sleeping bag was zipped neatly, his boots gone, footprints leading into the forest, and stopping 20 feet later, like he had vanished mid-step. Rescuers searched for 2 weeks. No signs of struggle, no scent trail, no body. The search map showed one strange thing. All GPS devices malfunctioned near that same area. One drone used by the rescue team captured a single frame before losing signal. A pale 2-story house standing alone in a clearing. When authorities returned to the coordinates, there was nothing, just untouched forest. Months later, Natalie checked her phone's location history. Every GPS point looked normal, except one. On the night Eric disappeared, her map app had recorded an address. It read, "On Stillwater Road." Brookmere, Virginia doesn't have a Stillwater Road, it never did. They say that if you walk long enough in those woods, your GPS might start recalculating. It'll show a shortcut that wasn't there before, leading straight to a house with no shadows. And if you follow it, you'll never find your way back. It was supposed to be a simple cleanup job. Just one more shift before the building was demolished. In 2015, Henry Caldwell, a night janitor from Detroit, was assigned to clean out the old WQCR radio station, which had been shut down since 1987 after a transmitter fire. The company planned to tear it down the following month, but the demolition crew refused to enter at night. The power lines around the building still hummed even though the electricity had long been disconnected. Henry didn't believe in hauntings. He'd worked alone in empty factories and schools for years. Silence didn't bother him. The only thing that did was the smell of dust and time, the stale air that seemed to cling to your skin. He clocked in at 9 p.m., turned on his flashlight, and pushed his cleaning cart through the cracked glass doors. Inside, the air was thick with static. Every step echoed. The walls were covered in faded posters of talk shows long forgotten, and the smell of burnt plastic still lingered. He worked his way to the recording studio, where a single tape recorder sat on the desk, still plugged in. The tape inside was spinning slowly, though there was no electricity in the building. Henry froze. The reels turned with a faint metallic squeal. A low voice came through the speaker, muffled, distorted, but undeniably human.
Test, is anyone still here?
Henry thought maybe someone was playing a prank. He reached out, pressed stop, but the reels kept spinning. The machine refused to stop. Then through the static, the voice spoke again.
"Henry, you're late."
He stumbled backward, his flashlight trembling in his hand. The light flickered, illuminating the booth window. For a moment, he saw his own reflection staring back. But it wasn't mirroring him. It was still standing perfectly still, smiling faintly. The reflection lifted a hand, but Henry hadn't moved. He dropped his flashlight, the beam rolling across the floor. The reflection whispered something, lips moving silently behind the glass, and the words appeared, not as sound, but as text on the reel-to-reel display, faint green letters burning through the dust. "Stay until the end." Henry bolted out of the studio. His shoes squeaked on the linoleum as he ran down the hall toward the exit, but the lights flickered above him, faintly coming to life, one by one, humming as if the building itself was waking up. He reached the main door and yanked the handle. It didn't move. The glass looked different now, thicker, distorted, reflecting only darkness behind him. Then, over the building's old intercom system, the tape began to play again, louder this time. "You shouldn't have left your mic on, Henry." The sound of a chair scraping echoed from the studio down the hall. He turned. The flashlight he dropped was still rolling in small circles, casting moving shadows across the walls. The door to the recording booth was open again. though he'd slammed it shut. The tape recorder's reels spun faster now, the hiss of static growing louder, forming whispers. They weren't words anymore, just voices overlapping, like dozens of people talking at once in a language he couldn't understand. And then, suddenly, one voice rose above the rest, clear and calm. Last broadcast, WQCR, October 31st, 1987. The date of the fire. Henry backed up against the wall, shaking. Smoke began to fill the corridor, though nothing burned. The lights dimmed, and in the haze, he saw movement, shadows of people seated at microphones, laughing softly. One of them turned toward him, the shape of its face missing, hollow where the eyes should be. The tape recorder clicked again. "We were on air when the fire started," the voice said. "They never turned us off." Henry ran for the back exit, slamming against it until the rusted latch gave way. Cold air hit him. He fell into the parking lot, coughing, his ears ringing from static. Behind him, the station windows glowed faintly orange, like an ember refusing to die. He called the foreman the next morning and quit. He didn't mention what he'd heard, just said the place was unsafe. 2 weeks later, the demolition crew brought the building down. When they cleared the rubble, they found the reel-to-reel machine intact beneath a pile of ash and twisted metal. The reels were still spinning. The last 5 seconds of the tape contained a recording. It wasn't Henry's voice. It was the sound of someone breathing into a microphone. Then a whisper. "You left before we finished." The sound of a door creaking open followed, and then the broadcast cut off. When the audio engineer who analyzed the tape enhanced the background noise, he found something unsettling. Underneath the static was faint music, the same jingle WQCR used before commercial breaks. And over that, layered softly, was Henry's own voice. Test, is anyone still here?" The engineer quit the project immediately. The tape was sent to storage and labeled "Property of WQCR Fire Investigation, Do Not Play." But every Halloween night just before midnight, that same frequency, 104.3 AM, comes alive again across Detroit's airwaves. Static first, then breathing, then the faint echo of that same question, looping endlessly through the night. Test, is anyone still here?" It began like any other night on the late shift. On October 19th, 2017, Jared Lang, a 42-year-old bus driver in the town of Pine Hollow, finished his second-to-last route of the evening. The town was quiet, tucked between forests and low hills, the kind of place where the last bus of the night might carry 2 people, if that. His final run, Route 12B, left downtown at 11:55 p.m. and reached the outskirts by 12:40. At 11:53, the depot camera caught Jared stepping onto his bus, coffee in one hand, timetable in the other. He looked tired but calm. He waved to the night dispatcher and said, "Last run." He never came back. When the bus was found the next morning, it sat at the far edge of Old Creek Road, headlights off, doors closed, and engine cold. There were no footprints in the frost outside, only a set of tire tracks ending cleanly where the bus had stopped. Inside, all the seats were soaked as if it had rained indoors, and a fine white frost covered the windows from the inside out. The security system, which should have recorded the entire route, had been wiped except for the first 10 minutes. Those first 10 minutes showed Jared driving through the empty town, humming to himself. The streetlights flickered occasionally, but the road was clear. Around the 7-minute mark, the interior lights began to dim, though power on the bus was otherwise stable. At 8 minutes 12 seconds, Jared looked in the rearview mirror and frowned. There were passengers behind him. They hadn't boarded. The depot footage confirmed no one else entered the bus. But the reflection showed 3 figures seated at the back, their outlines blurred, unmoving. Jared turned around. The seats were empty. When he looked back at the mirror, the shapes were gone. He muttered, "Not tonight, please." At 9 minutes 47 seconds, the radio crackled with a voice. Female, faint. "Last stop, don't forget the bridge." Jared adjusted the dial thinking it was dispatch, but the line was dead. Dispatch never called him. Then the GPS display flickered. Instead of his programmed route, the map now showed a detour, a straight line cutting through the forest to something labeled Pine Hollow Terminal. There was no such terminal. Jared slowed the bus. Through the windshield, fog rolled across the road, thick and low. He hesitated for a full 30 seconds, then sighed and turned onto the detour. The footage ended there. When investigators recovered the external black box camera, it had captured a final clip, 15 seconds of distorted video. The bus moving through dense fog, trees bending inward as if the forest were closing around it. The road appeared wet, though no rain had fallen. Then, just before the file cut to static, a reflection in the driver's side glass showed Jared looking toward the camera, but his eyes were black, and someone else's hand was on the wheel. Weeks later, a highway patrol officer discovered a second bus deep in the woods, more than 20 miles from Old Creek Road. The vehicle was rusted, its tires flat, its logo faded to ghost letters. Inside, the seats were arranged backward, facing the rear door, and a thin layer of frost coated everything. On the driver's seat lay a timetable dated October 19, 1987, exactly 30 years before Jared disappeared. The name on the schedule was unreadable, burned away by moisture. DNA from the steering wheel matched no one in the system. Residents near the forest sometimes report hearing the sound of brakes and an engine idling after midnight. On foggy nights, faint bus lights appear between the trees, then vanish without a sound. Local legend says there's a route that runs only once a year, the last bus to Pine Hollow. It doesn't pick you up from where you stand. It appears where you least expect it, when you're tired, cold, or alone, and the driver always looks familiar. If you ever see that bus waiting with its door open, they say you'll feel compelled to board. And when you sit down, every seat will be facing backward. It was meant to be a peaceful escape, a weekend to disconnect, to breathe, to forget the noise of the city. In November 2021, Lauren Mitchell, a 29-year-old writer from Denver, rented a remote cabin in the Colorado mountains through a small website that specialized in off-grid getaways. It wasn't on Airbnb or any major platform. It was a local listing she'd found through a friend of a friend. The photos showed a small, beautiful log cabin tucked between pine trees, no neighbors for miles, advertised as the perfect quiet. When she arrived, the drive had taken nearly 5 hours from the nearest town. The air was thin and cold, the ground already dusted with the first snow of the season. Her phone had lost signal 30 minutes earlier, but she didn't mind. She was there to finish her manuscript, to write without distraction. The cabin was smaller than the photos made it seem, but cozy. Wooden walls, a stone fireplace, and a single oil lamp on the table. There was no electricity, no running water. The key was left in the lockbox by the door, exactly as promised. But when Lauren stepped inside, she noticed something strange almost immediately. There were no light switches, no outlets, and most disturbing of all, no doors. Not just no bedroom or bathroom doors, there wasn't even a front or back door. She turned around in confusion. The entrance she'd just walked through wasn't there anymore. The wall behind her was solid wood. Her breathing quickened. She pressed her palms against the logs. Solid, cold, real. She whispered to herself, "I came through here. I came through here." She tried to stay calm. Maybe there was another exit she hadn't seen, a back window, a trap door. But there were only 3 small windows, all nailed shut, none large enough to climb through. The cabin's single room was simple: a table, a chair, a bed, and a small shelf stacked with books. She picked one up. The cover was blank. The pages inside were covered in faint handwriting, her handwriting, pages and pages of it. Each line repeated the same sentence. "The door is where you last looked." She dropped the book and stumbled back, heart pounding. "This is a trick," she muttered. "Someone's here." She ran to the window, trying to pry it open, but the glass didn't even rattle. Outside, the trees stood still. No wind, no sound, not even birds. It was as if the world had frozen. When she looked down at the snow beyond the glass, she saw footprints. They led from the forest straight to the cabin, but stopped right beneath the window. There were no footprints leading away. Lauren backed away slowly. That's when she heard it. A faint tapping from inside the walls. Tap, tap, tap. She turned toward the sound. It came from behind the bookshelf. The tapping became scratching, then a low, dragging noise, like fingers moving across wood. She whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. But then from somewhere deep inside the cabin, a voice whispered back. Her own voice. "The door is where you last looked." She froze. The lamp flickered. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She tried not to look at the shelf, but something behind it moved. Just a shadow, slow and deliberate, like someone pressing against the wall from the other side. The boards flexed slightly, creaking with each movement. Lauren grabbed her coat and backed into the corner. The light dimmed until the room was almost pitch black. The lamp flickered again, and in the reflection of its glass, she saw something standing behind her. It looked like her, same hair, same clothes, but the face was blank, smooth skin where eyes and mouth should be. The lamp went out. The next morning, a park ranger patrolling near the ridge found Lauren's car parked off the trail. The engine was cold. Her belongings were inside: phone, wallet, and notebook, but no sign of her. The cabin's coordinates didn't exist on any property registry. When investigators tried to find the location based on her GPS trail, it led to an empty clearing. No cabin, no structure, just snow. The only thing found at the site was a single book buried beneath the frost. Inside were the same words written in a frantic hand. "The door is where you last looked." And on the very last page, written in faint pencil, "If you find the cabin, don't open the door." Locals now call that area Whispers Hollow. Hikers who wander too deep into the trees report hearing knocking behind them, sometimes soft, sometimes close, and a few claim to have seen a small cabin appear between the trees at twilight, only for it to vanish when they blink. They say that once you see it, you start dreaming of it, and in your dreams there are no doors. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to NightFear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.